Okay, well, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Pacific Tango Group webinar series. If you're joining us from the Asia Pac region, good morning, and thank you all very much for joining us today. My name is Seiji Oyasu. I'm one of the founders of the Pacific Tango Group and your moderator for the evening. We're very pleased to have one of our illustrious members of the Pacific Tango Group, Kasia Lynch, provide us with some of her insights and expertise related to Japanese culture and Japanese business. Her talk is entitled Using Bilingual Bicultural Employees to Support U.S.-Japanese Businesses. But before we get to her presentation, I'd like to say a quick word about our organization. Pacific Tango Group, LLC, is focused on helping Asia-Pacific originated companies succeed in the USA. We engage with clients prior to entering the American market to help them plan and prepare for a successful launch. We also work with clients after arriving in America to help them establish their physical, legal, and business presence. And then finally, we work with established subsidiaries of Asian companies to help them stay abreast of local markets and business changes. Pacific Tango Group is a consortium of highly skilled international business professionals, each representing a functional service area such as sales, digital marketing, technology implementation, strategy, operations, human resources, and distribution, just to name a few. Most clients engage with Pacific Tango Group in a variety of ways. Short-term tasks or projects. These may be limited scope projects that the client doesn't have the internal resources to complete themselves or which have a limited time basis. Some examples are translation, documentation, and business process review. Midterm initiatives, advertising campaigns, corporate or product branding, creation of accounting systems, and sales and business development are some of the activities that fall into this category. And then finally, long-term sustained outsourcing. These would include such services as accounting, HR, sales, and business development. For more information about our group, Pacific Tango, or for contact information, please go to our website, which is pacifictangogroup.com. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. Kasia Lynch is a trilingual American who spent 8 years in Japan, including high school, college, graduate school, and her professional career. She earned her bachelor's from Boston University and a master's from Tokyo's Ochanomizu University, which many of you may know is on the level of an Ivy League school in Japan. Kasia's career utilizing Japanese language and cultural skills began in 2003 with concert promotion, and later moved to interpreting and translating electronics and the automotive industry. She was able to do this while living in Japan, Poland, Italy, and the US. Since starting her company, Ikigai Connections in 2018, Kasia has been featured in various Japan-related podcasts, websites, and webinars, including US Jet Alumni Association, Small Business Japan, Laurasian Institution, Japan Expert Insights, and BFF Tokyo. Her goal for nihongojobs.com to become the go-to job board for all Japanese jobs in the US. We'll start by having Kasia lead the discussion. We'll set aside about 10 to 15 minutes at the end where Kasia will be happy to take your questions. Please feel free to unmute yourself and speak up, but if you prefer, you can type your question in the chat function. Without any further ado, Kasia Lynch.
Thank you very much for having me, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I see some familiar names and really excited that you decided to share some time. I know your time is valuable, so let's get started. I'm going to share my screen and I believe you should all be seeing it right now, but if you don't, please holler. So I'm very excited to talk today about bilingual, bicultural employees. This is something that is near and dear to my heart. It is my Ikigai, and Ikigai from my company name, Ikigai Connections, is a Japanese word that stands for your passion. It's been popularized in the West, and it's become kind of a new word to use over here in Europe and America. So it is something that I firmly believe in. I think it's important to like what you do and find a job that lights you up. So I connect Japanese speaking job seekers as well as globally minded employers. So today This webinar is specifically for HR managers who work at Japanese companies, and especially for those who struggle to search for, interview, and hire bilingual candidates. So by the end of this webinar, my hope is that you have a better understanding of job seekers' experiences with Japanese language and culture, as well as how it can benefit your organization. So you might actually be overlooking some candidates that are in your local area that I would like to show you how they can actually be of benefit to your organization. So our agenda is we'll briefly go through the first and the second points, and then we'll spend a majority of the content talking about the benefits of using these employees that I'll share with you and some corporate success stories. So first of all, as Seiji kindly introduced me, I have a website for, it's called Ikigai Connections, and within that I have a job board for Japanese jobs in the United States. So I consider myself more of a digital bridge where I connect globally minded employers like yourselves who are joining us today, as well as 5,000 followers who are Japanese English bilingual job seekers. Majority of these followers of mine are people who I'm actually going to introduce you to today. So I have native Japanese speakers as well as non-native Japanese speakers. So let's first take a quick step back and talk about your bilingual talent needs in the United States right now. So there's ways that many companies use to support your bilingual bicultural needs when it comes to Japanese and English. One of them is to bring expats from Japan, and you bring them here for a few years, 3 to 5 years, sometimes with family. Another one is to hire local native Japanese people that speak English. They know the local area and they can help you. The third one is locally hired non-native Japanese speakers. So people like myself who are into Japanese and want to use that in a career. Then you have professional translators and interpreters, which you can hire, as well as consulting companies that teach Japanese business culture, and they can teach Japanese language, things like that. So today we're going to be focusing mainly on number 3, locally hired non-native Japanese speakers. The reason I highlight this group is because I believe that they are underrepresented. I believe they are an untapped resource. And in today's presentation, I will explain exactly why. So you may be missing out on this group of bilingual candidates, mainly because you may not understand what goes into Japanese language qualifications, what goes into a bilingual role, as well as maybe not really understanding the full capacity of their skills. So let's talk briefly about what Kagehashi means. Kagehashi is a Japanese word that means bridge in Japanese, and I have used this term to coin this group of job seekers. So basically they are local, non-native Japanese job seekers, and they understand the Japanese language and business culture. So they can be entry level, so they're interns, students, or graduates. They can be returnees from the JET program or the MEXT program. And the JET program is the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program, where people from around the world go to Japan to teach English or to work in governmental offices. They're there for a couple years, it's 2 to 5 on average. And depending on the roles that they have, they can come back with a very high understanding of what it's like to live and work in Japan. Now, MEXT is a scholarship that I've actually received where you go to Japan and you are at a school, you're able to extend your graduate school, your graduate experience, and you learn a lot of Japanese by attending Japanese classes and speaking all day 100% in Japanese. So that's what I did. And there's lots of these people coming back from these programs that feel kind of out of place and they don't know how to jump back into the American job search. So I would like to highlight them as well. And then also mid-career employees that underutilize their Japanese skills. There's a lot of people who come back from these programs, or maybe they study Japanese in a college program, but they haven't really seen jobs that advertise for people like them. So they've kind of just pushed aside their desire to use Japanese in a career, and they haven't gone after that dream. So my mission in Ikigai Connections is to help them finally reach their dreams. So there's a lot of people that are mid-career and advanced professionals who have not used Japanese, and they are actually interested in jumping back into using it. So what exactly can Kagehashi do? I have listed just a few of these here, which includes linguistic and cultural support, not just administrative support, but also additional expertise. And having a Kagehashi on your team helps with the visa concerns that we are all facing currently with this pandemic and inability to bring lots of Japanese expats from Japan. And also these Kagehashi are very passionate about Japan. I don't know what it is about learning Japanese in this culture. It's not just learning or knowing manga or anime. It's much more than that. People like myself who study Japanese, it's just something that we absolutely love. And when you're passionate about something and you bring that to your career, to your job, I think a passionate employee is a very good employee. So let's just give you a quick overview of these Japanese language learners. A lot of them go for certifications, and I'll talk about this in the final portion of my presentation about this Japanese language proficiency test. People around the world are going for it, levels N1 to N5, and thousands of them pass the top level of the N1. College level Japanese, there's a lot of Japanese language programs in the United States. And in Michigan alone, I know that there's thousands of students who I speak with individually, and they are very passionate about finding a job using Japanese skills. And also a lot of these people who are looking for jobs have been in Japan, like I mentioned on the JET program. So Kagehashi in general, they need an opportunity and they need training. And I'm hoping that the employers who have joined us today are interested in helping provide these opportunities. And I can help with the training at a later time. That's a different conversation, but you can always reach out to me for that. And also, as we know, the COVID-19 situation it might actually be a way, an opportunity to try some local Kagehashi, especially when you're struggling to bring employees from Japan. So instead of doing nothing, maybe it's this opportunity to try somebody like this. So now I'm going to dig into some Kagehashi benefits. And this, I'm going to go into some specific examples that you can apply to your industry as well. But in general, Kagehashi want to help you because they love Japan and the Japanese language. Again, it's not just manga and anime. There are some very serious, studious people out there who have double majors in engineering, accounting, business. There's a lot of people who are highly skilled and they just want to use that Japanese component. They understand Japanese business concepts. So many of you may not understand, but there's things like kaizen, nemawashi, horenso, and they understand this and they know what it's like to act in a business setting. And also they're very humble. And I'll mention this later on in the presentation as well, but a lot of people who study Japanese, because it's such a humble culture and in business as well, they almost become humble themselves. So that's actually one of the ways you can tell if somebody is very good at their Japanese language skills and cultural skills because they become humble. And also they are very motivated if they can use their language skills on the job. So now let's go into an administrative benefits. And this is where it's usually the gateway for people when they want to consider using a Kagehashi. They'll think of the admin roles. Administratively, they allow executives to focus on what executives are good at. So they can help with taking over correspondence, maybe some light translation, maybe some coordination, some travel support. They really help managers, executives to focus on what the executives really need to do, especially if they're an executive from Japan sent to the United States and kind of connecting with Japan and the United States, and they're extremely overworked. They also, if they are involved in a project, they can help speed up communication. So for example, if you involve them in a small project even that connects with Japan and the United States, if they're CC'd on all the emails and they get an email from Japan when they get to work in the morning, so it's Japan's evening, they read the emails, they put them into their English, they send them back out to the whole team, and the team in the United States reads these emails, understands what's going on, they spend the day working on what they need to do, maybe by the end of the day they send an email, this Kagehashi can jump in and also translate back into Japanese so that Japan wakes up, they get it. So it's just this really smooth flow that happens. And this Kagehashi who is involved in the middle with just some basic interpret or translation skills, they actually start to learn more about the content and they can become much more than just an informal translator. Even interns, I've used interns in the past and they work fantastic because they can help with temporary assistance of some projects. And it's a way for the employer to see if this is a potential employee for once this student graduates from college, and I've even had a high school intern in the past too, and they work very nicely. So overall, they are very trustworthy people. And this is an important point to mention about these people, these Kagehashi. So they ensure that all sides are on the same page. And because they love Japan and they want communication to occur, they're naturally going to step in and take on this role that is extremely, it requires trust on both sides. And I think this is extremely important to keep in mind. They're not taking the place of interpreters, translators. They're kind of like a communicator, and they help with bridging any gaps that may arise. They will notice if there's an issue that comes up, and they can kind of, they can become, like this, the glue that holds the two sides together. They also can help localize any position or skill set. So a lot of Japanese companies that have overseas subsidiaries, they struggle with this point too, because they don't have enough Japanese expats to go overseas. So if you had like a Kagehashi helping out with a very key role, you might even help that Japanese expat kind of get relieved of some, all the work stress, just because they're helping them with particular tasks, even just, a chart here, a translation there. So there's lots of things, and I'll go into some more concrete examples in just a moment. They also strengthen relationships. And this is something that is underutilized and it's not understood as much. I know that there's so many differences, and when you're communicating with someone overseas, whether it's email or video conferences, or even in-person meetings if someone travels, and I know now travel is not happening right now, but they can help, for example, local Americans that they're working with, and they can share their love of Japan. Hey, when I was in Japan, I did this, or did you know about this? This food is great, try this. They can also help the expats who are here from Japan, because they understand what it's like to work overseas. They know the difficulties, and they can help kind of just alleviate their concerns. Maybe they can even speak to them in Japanese because they want to learn their Japanese, or they can help with their English. So it's just, they're kind of helping bridge this gap between any two groups. So I think it's you may not see this as much, it's not as clear, but over time you see how it helps also strengthening that relationship with this glue. So after this webinar, I'll share this list with everybody, but if you're interested right now, you can use this QR code to take a look at this list I've created. You can basically take a look at, there's different departments, and I've even divided it by basic, intermediate, and advanced levels of Japanese. You can take a look and see, like, just to get an example of what it could be like in your specific company. This is more generic. I try to think of all different industries. So just think of it as planting that seed to see what ideas can come up with. But now we're going to go into some exact examples based on what a Kagehashi can do. So let's talk about expats from Japan and how to support them. So an expat has a question about living in the United States. Maybe they don't know where to get their groceries, where to get, a particular product that they want from Japan. Maybe they're having a concern about driving. But because they're not confident with using their English, they may not go to the HR department and say, hey, I have a problem, I have a question about this. Now, if you stick somebody in HR or admin or wherever who is their go-to person who happens to speak Japanese, I promise you the expats now have more confidence, and they're not as shy about going to this person and asking them questions. Hey, where can I get my oil change done? Things like that. So it's really helpful to have that go-to person for an expat, because they do have questions, especially if they have family and they have questions about their families, whether it's daycare, schooling, or housing. There's lots of questions that they will have, so you can help with that. Health insurance is a big one. If you have a Kagehashi helping out in the HR department, they will definitely be able to help with understanding what the heck of, this copay thing is, or where to go to a doctor. Maybe there's a doctor that speaks Japanese. Speaking of doctors, this is especially important because maybe you have an expat who needs to go to the doctor right away. They don't feel comfortable. Maybe they do feel comfortable with the Kagehashi and they can go together. Maybe they need it immediately, so you can't find an interpreter to go with somebody last minute. So I find that this was extremely helpful in my experience. So a Kagehashi, you could have a person dedicated to the expat support for just this expat questions. Next example. So you have somebody traveling to Japan on business, and maybe they have been to Japan, maybe they never have, but they don't know really what to do. Now, if you get a Kagehashi, they can help with, even if, and especially if they don't have Japanese language skills perfect, you can have somebody who's been to Japan, who knows what it's like to go from the airport to the train station to the facility, or maybe how to buy a ticket on the train, how to, what food to buy, how to interact, all those things that somebody would need on a business trip. This Kagehashi can help them with that. They can create maps. They can help them with, like what to wear during the, what shoes, and if somebody, smoking rules are different in Japan too. So somebody can really help with this. And then the employee or the manager who travels to Japan feels relief because they already feel like they have an understanding of this foreign country that they're visiting. Let's talk about the overall relationship. And I mentioned this a little bit before, how the Kagehashi can be the glue between expats from Japan who are here in the United States with local employees. Sometimes it just doesn't seem cohesive. Now, if you stick a Kagehashi in there in the middle, like I mentioned, they can find a way to talk with the local Americans about Japan, same with the expats, and they just kind of slowly and naturally bring the two groups together. I've even experienced events in the past where, we have a summer event to explain what an okonomiyaki or a typical Japanese summer food is, and we share it with the American employees, and just kind of like bridging the gaps in a natural way does wonders for the relationships in the office. Let's talk about customers. If you have an expat who's dealing with Japanese customers, they might be extremely busy and they may need a little bit of support. And maybe, just maybe, this Kagehashi with the Japanese language skills would be able to support this customer and may even shadow them and see what this Japanese expat does with customers. And Kagehashi can learn a lot of things, and maybe they will, because they're involved in your company, they'll learn your products, they'll be able to sell it in a different way too, and maybe they can work in tandem to promote to the Japanese customers and as well as the local American customers. So a Kagehashi can really support a busy expat in this regard. Technical drawings, especially if you're in the manufacturing industry, sometimes you get these drawings that have all these Japanese characters, and it's really difficult to know. So if you have a Kagehashi who happens to have maybe a background in engineering, mathematics, or a love of kanji, they'll be able to help with figuring this out and helping. They can become a go-to for this instead of always going to the Japanese expats, which everyone knows they are probably the busiest people in the companies because they're dealing with Japan and the United States. Now, meetings, we know that it can be extremely confusing sometimes for both sides because there are slight nuances and differences in how meetings are run in Japan as well as the United States. If you have a Kagehashi who understands both sides, they will be able to help with the frustration. They can help prepare the American side for what it's like to be at a company, maybe even share where, the unspoken rules of where to sit, and maybe you should, do some nemawashi before the meeting. What does that mean? Helping the Americans out with that, as well as the Japanese employees, because maybe it's frustrating for them to come to a meeting where there's so many opinions being thrown around the room and they're not prepared for this. So Kagehashi can be very helpful with this too. And this has happened, I've heard of this example many times, that headquarters in Japan rolls out a new policy globally, and then the local American staff get this information. It might already be translated in English, but they don't really understand the why it's happening or what it really means to them. And Kagehashi can help localize that content. They can understand the why, and they can maybe translate it in a way that makes sense to the local employees. This is also very important, especially when you have your company values and a mission statement that you want to be very well understood. So, as you can tell, I'm a huge fan of Kagehashi, and I think that they really can do a lot for your organizations. So let's talk about some concrete examples, and they include companies, Hero Tech, which is in Michigan, and that's actually my story. That's where the Kagehashi story begins. Then I'll also give an example of THK Manufacturing of America in Ohio, as well as ALPS Alpine North America here in Michigan as well. So Hero Tech they have 30 locations all around the world, and they deal with closures, exhaust systems, and they are very, very global in my humble opinion. I was there for 5.5 years, and I really enjoyed communicating with people all over the world, and it was just a wonderful experience, which is why I have Ikigai Connections right now. So let me dig in a little bit of my personal story here. I started as a bilingual executive assistant, and I was working, my direct supervisor was perfectly fluent in English. He did not need me to do any interpreting, translating. I was there to support him with just a little bit of the workload. So he had some Japanese to English correspondence that needed to be either translated, maybe revised, maybe he wrote something and he wanted the English nuance to be more native sounding. I also jumped with the HR department support to help with the expats coming from Japan and any Japanese visitors that came. I was always kind of a part of these meetings, and I helped just kind of connect with these people, and it was a wonderful opportunity. Little did I know that 5.5 years later, I would be the manager of an executive admin department, and I had an entire department of Kagehashi, as well as supporting other Kagehashi employees in different departments. So what happened is that we were able to provide linguistic support, which goes without saying. We could use our Japanese language skills to help. And I mentioned there's Kagehashi in all departments. Even today, they're in HR, executive admin, and engineering. Kagehashi currently still serve as a bridge between headquarters and the local branch. So any kind of questions they had towards HereTech America, they would be the go-to people. And it was really kind of a great system. Everybody knew that that's the person to go to if they have any questions. And then that Kagehashi would be like, oh, this is sales. And they would share it with the sales. Oh, this is R&D. And they share with R&D. They became members of global teams. I was a part of global HR, and there was global IT and other global teams that group companies were all participating in to make sure that the entire HereTech group, even though it was spread out among all these locations, was still on the same page with regards to the key directions. We were the key support in implementing HereTechism, which was what we call the history of HereTech and the explanation of the mission statement and the values, which was translated in various languages. There was also a standardization of global expat support. I helped in creating handbooks and sharing it with all the group companies to make sure that any expat who goes to any other group company in any other part of the world has the same amount of service or support wherever they go. And also, I found it very interesting that other group companies in different countries, China, Korea, Mexico, India, they also were trying to find similar people who spoke their local language, plus Japanese and maybe even English, to help support. So it was the rise of bilingual Kagehashi that I was really excited to hear about. So this was successful in HereTech America, and it continues to this day. I'm still very much in touch with them. And there's a few reasons for this. So HereTech headquarters drives globalization because they had a pain point. They did not have enough Japanese expats to go overseas. So what did they do? They had a goal. They're going to create an environment where global talent can perform successfully. They started sending more people from Japan overseas to learn and become expats. So currently, there's 67% of the employees are non-Japanese, and the group continues to expand. And the group executives understand the strong need for globalization, especially because they have experienced becoming an expat themselves. So that is also why there are local leaders in the non-Japanese operations. So it's it's a Japanese company, but wherever you go in the local area, they are localized as well. So it's very global in that perspective. Now, HereTech America in particular is where I worked. So it's a very hybrid corporate culture, Japanese and American, and a family-like environment. So they had town halls and events, and obviously now there's not much happening, but it's a way that you connected the employees together. You had, Q&A in the town halls from all employees to ask the management questions. The management was very open to utilizing bilingual, bicultural talent, and they are the ones who would often come to the Kagehashi for help and empower these Kagehashi to do some crazy projects that normally would not be given to these people. But because the Kagehashi were given such big tasks, they felt empowered, and it's a wonderful experience. Also, we're very fortunate here in Michigan. We have many great candidates, lots of great schools with great Japanese language programs. So we were able to share with them, and a lot of people applied to these roles, and they're very high caliber candidates. Here, and this is a quote from my former boss, and I think that Uno-san is really one of the pivotal reasons why Kagehashi can have this opportunity, because he really helped push this. So as you can read here, our bilingual and multicultural employees have been critical assets to HereTech, transforming us from an international company led by Japan to a global organization with interconnected operations in and outside of Japan. So I'm still thankful. I still connect with Uno-san, and it's just wonderful to have this support from such an influential person. And he shares the message with other Japanese executives to tell them that this type of Kagehashi employee is really vital to an organization. So let's go to the next case. And this is, I've been meeting lots of wonderful people through LinkedIn connections, networking, online events, and I have been getting to know, I've gotten to know many people from THK Manufacturing of America. So they are the leading manufacturer of linear motion guides, ball screws, bearings, and joints, which are used in various types of industrial, robotic, and production machinery. They also produce automotive components such as linkage and suspension products. So they have a very supportive management in the same way as my previous employer here at Tech America. So the language and communications department, they have bilingual employees, including local Kagehashi, and they help prepare them to support other departments linguistically. Now, these other departments also have at least one bilingual employee in their department. So we have accounting, IT, scheduling, and engineering. They offer Japanese language classes. So they have casual ones for all employees, anybody who's interested in learning the language, and then they have more specific ones for key employees that have to actually use the Japanese language in their career. They have a robust co-op, internship, and job shadow program, and they enjoy working with employees that like communication and language learning. So I really applaud this company for doing so well. They're such a star in this manufacturing environment of ours out here in the Midwest. So I really applaud THK Manufacturing. So one more company is ALPS Alpine. They're here in Auburn Hills, Michigan as well. And they are a global company that is responsible for the design of many component parts of devices that you use every day. They provide a fun work environment, the ability to learn and develop professional work skills, and the opportunity for a flexible work schedule. Now, I bring them up here today because they have something called the International Associates Program. This is a 2-year program that is for people who are not Japanese. They get to go to Japan for 2 years, and everything is covered by the company. When this 2-year program is done, they can stay in Japan. They can stay at a different ALPS Alpine location, or they don't have to. There's no commitment for them to stay within the group at all. But this is a wonderful opportunity for these young individuals coming out of college to go to Japan, which is so many people's dream. And I just find it fantastic that ALPS Alpine is able to do something like this. So that comes to now we are at the last portion of my presentation. And here I will be addressing many concerns that I hear time and time again from HR managers and other executives who don't really understand what they can do with these Kagehashi. So we'll talk about language, we'll talk about culture, and we'll talk about skills in general. So let's talk about language here. So common feedback includes, we typically seek English-speaking native Japanese candidates. Now I know that's very difficult currently because the pandemic is not allowing visas to be given. So this is something that's kind of a pain point for lots of companies. Also, I hear that we need somebody who is fluent, and they can't find local Japanese employees who can help them out. And maybe if they do find somebody like myself who is non-Japanese but wants to use my language skills, they may not consider me as fluent. Also, we can outsource certain projects to professional interpreters and translators. However, this becomes a pain point for many small companies that only have 1 to 5 or even 10 employees, and they cannot afford this service. So to these, I say that having a Kagehashi could be a kind of solution that you can work together hand in hand with those projects, with those previous ideas. But what I need everybody to understand here is that knowing Japanese language is something so tricky sometimes. So your skills can change depending on your speaking, listening, your reading, writing, and even polite forms, which is called keigo in Japanese. Not to mention the writing kanji system is extremely difficult for a lot of people. There's also no real global standard for proficiency. There's no clear definition of what's basic, what's intermediate, what's advanced. These are the 3 that I use because it kind of helps divide it into 3, but really depending on what you're talking about, speaking, listening, reading, writing, etc., it can really be all over the place. I know professional translators who do not really speak and listen as well because it's not their skill. And then I know professional interpreters who may not be the best at writing characters, but that's just because they're constantly speaking and listening, and they may not necessarily be sitting and writing kanji all day. So also, and this I'll spend a little bit of time on, there's the Japanese language proficiency test that everyone talks about, and you think that you have to have N1 through N5. N1 is the best. But unfortunately, the JLPT does not cover speaking, and it doesn't really cover business Japanese. That's what the business Japanese proficiency test, the BJT, is for, but not many people know about the BJT. So there's a lot here going on that what I wish employers would know is that just because somebody has the JLPT doesn't mean that they're amazing, but conversely, just because they don't have it doesn't mean that they're not amazing. So take the JLPT with a grain of salt. It's only offered once a year outside the United States. Last year was canceled because of the pandemic. So please don't have the JLPT as a requirement for your job, for your jobs, because I don't think it's the best way to clarify whether somebody is a good candidate for you or not. But I know it's very difficult, especially if you have somebody to test it or gauge if somebody's Japanese language skills are appropriate or not. So you could have an expat helping you out with that. I also offer that service where I can help you with a bilingual interview. And it's very difficult to find the test to help with figuring out whether somebody is good for your organization or not. But pay attention to the BJT, because that is something that does test your business Japanese language skills. And it's really kind of wonderful. They talk about, what Japanese to use in a phone, in meetings, business customs. So the BJT is something that I recommend, but it's not as well known among companies nor job seekers. So also, the definition of fluent is all over the place. I believe that this is kind of a hot topic among people, because some people say that they're fluent when they're not able to do basic speaking, listening, reading, writing. And then there's some people who are so humble, they've been learning the Japanese language for years, but they don't consider themselves fluent because they're being humble about it. So I've written an entire article about this. I will share it after this conversation if you're interested in learning more about that. So my recommendations with the language component is, when you're writing a job description, instead of writing the word fluent, clarify your particular skill sets that you want for the job. Maybe talk to the manager that needs this employee and ask them a little bit more what exactly they need this person for. Is it the reading and writing? Is it technical drawings? Is it speaking with customers? And focus on that. And keep in mind that the longer someone studies, the more humble they tend to get. So I keep telling job seekers, don't be as humble if you're speaking to a non-Japanese person in an interview, but they do forget this sometimes. And next, I do have a job board. It is, as I mentioned, Seiji mentioned in the introduction, nihongojobs.com. I currently have 5,000 followers, as I mentioned, and these people are looking for native and non-native Japanese speakers. And as I mentioned to people who came to this event, I will be giving away a free job ad for everybody who stays towards the end. I'll give you a coupon code and you can test it out and see if you like it. And I know, I think it may be a way for you to see exactly what kind of candidates are out there. Next, let's talk about culture. What to know when considering Kagehashi. Not every job needs someone who is fluent in Japanese. So especially if you're helping with coordination or maybe travel, or maybe just maybe all you need is a basic understanding of Japanese business culture, which includes maybe the customs or the geography. Sometimes this can be enough. And there's a lot of candidates out there who see the word fluent in a job description or just advanced, and they won't apply because they don't think that they're a fit for this role. So if you can be a little bit more forgiving with regards to what exactly you want with the language and the culture, and keeping in mind that just living overseas is extremely underrated, because a lot of these people go overseas, whether it's in college as a young teen going overseas to a foreign country, or maybe the JET program or the MEX program. Going overseas and moving away from family or support system, hearing everything in a new language, trying to find a place to live, all of this makes you a stronger person. And these people have some great skills just from the overseas experience alone. So if you are able to consider somebody who's just returned from one of these programs and understand that at a minimum, their overseas experience and their cultural knowledge is something that really could be of use in your organization. So as I mentioned, some suggestions. Please consider a person who may not technically be fluent. And if you could adapt your job ad description for that, I think it would be very helpful. And once you get a good Kagehashi in your system, you'd be surprised that a lot of times these people are finally inspired to study more, to maybe they're going to be paying attention to the lingo that's in your organization, and they'll pick up on these words and become more proficient in the language. There's no college course that will prepare anybody for the terminology that's used in your industry, in your particular company. That's something that needs to be on the job. So give them a chance. And of course, as I mentioned, here's the QR code for that list of how to use Kagehashi. I will be sending it afterwards from the PTG email after this to give you the URL for that as well. So let's talk about skills now. And we're coming to the end of our presentation. So if you have any questions you want to ask, please go ahead and start writing them now. So we have I hear these comments as well when it comes to skills, that we need somebody right away with many years of experience. But I would really encourage you, if you can, take some time, go back into how it was when you were graduating from high school or college, and you've got this degree and you really don't know what to do with it. And all the jobs that you look at are, even the entry-level ones say that you need experience. It's very difficult for a lot of people to find their first job. So if you can be a little bit more forgiving and let somebody come in who has maybe not everything that you're requiring, maybe not the experience, but has the language, or doesn't have the language and has the experience, I think that would be very helpful for them. I also hear that we prefer expats from Japan, and I am not saying in any stretch of the imagination that these Kagehashi are going to replace expats. This is working together, and a lot of times the Kagehashi can be a great support for employees from Japan. So some suggestions, as again, I keep repeating this, but it's just so important. If you could please consider a less than fluent candidate if they have the technical skills that you may need. And I've seen a lot of job ads for bilingual, project manager, bilingual design engineer, bilingual controls engineer. But some candidate who has all the technical components, they'll see like the advanced or the bilingual or the fluent word, and they'll just be like, yeah, well, I don't really have that. So they won't even apply. If you can at least clarify a little bit more on what you need and say that, give them the opportunity to learn a little bit on the job with the terminology that you have, I think they really will surprise you. And vice versa, be open to considering a candidate without all of the technical skills if their language skills are high. So I've heard of many people in the past who have come into an organization, they just knew the language, they happened to help one particular department, and before you know it, they were the manager of that department, including all the technical skills with their language components. So they picked up on the technical skills over time. So keep that in mind too. And again, if you could consider JET or MEX participants, those who come back from an overseas experience, I think that you'd be very surprised to know that their work experience in Japan could be extremely important to your organization, and they can adapt to the other things, the other skills that you're requiring. And this is my final point, and then we'll get to the conclusion, but I just want to put a little plug in there for people who are considered job hoppers. I think that job hoppers have a bad reputation. I know in the United States it's not considered as bad as in Japan, which has this lifetime employment. That's a different topic too. But I personally think that there's always a personal story. Somebody's got a story as to why they've changed jobs. Maybe something happened in their personal life. Maybe they've felt that they had to move. Maybe it just wasn't a part of their dreams. So they're still looking for a home. And if you have this opportunity to meet with somebody and they really check all the boxes with language and other skills, but maybe you see that they've been job hopping for a little bit, I still encourage you to give them a try. Maybe they just need a place where they can feel valuable, where they can feel that their skills are actually useful. So just a little plug there for those people who are job hoppers. I think that you could give them a chance. I think it would be very worthwhile. So, and here's a great quote from Richard Branson that I just saw on LinkedIn today, and I wanted to put in here. Train people well enough so they can leave. Treat them well enough so they don't want to. And I think that's just a great way to end this. So in conclusion, advance your company's global efforts, relieve your local pain points, and let's grow this next generation of bilingual, bicultural candidates. So before I go into the Q&A, everybody who stayed here to the end, I wanted to give you a free job ad. So please use coupon code DOORPRIZE. And I will not be sharing this with anybody else. It's just the people who are here today. You can use this QR code. I'll also be sharing this in an email. You'll get it later on tonight or tomorrow. I would love for you to try out my new job board and let me know if you have any feedback. I just revamped it last week and a half. So if you see any hiccups, please let me know. I have nearly 1,000 job ads as of today, so it's growing, and I really believe that I will become, because I'm working so hard for it to become the go-to job board for Japanese jobs in the United States. So everybody here, please take a look, and if you have any questions, please let me know. So I'm going to stop sharing right now, and arigatou gozaimashita.
All right, thank you very, very much. That was a great presentation, Kasia. Thank you. So we'll open it up for Q&A. We have about 15 minutes or so. I would encourage anybody who has a question to go ahead and unmute themselves and go ahead and ask. If you're a little bashful, then feel free to just put it into the chat and I'll present it for you. So we'll give everybody a second to unmute and go ahead and ask your questions.
I did receive a direct message that I'll get started with. Okay. What is the job board for employers to post openings? Is there a cost? What is the average turnaround time from post to placement? Alrighty, so my job board is, I've made it very easy so that you just have to log in. So you create your account, you'll get an immediate email telling you the next steps. You're directed to create your job ad and your company profile, and then you get to post it once you see if it looks good. The cost is for a 30-day job placement or job ad, it is $150. And for 3 months, 90 days, it is $400. I also do it yourself, which a lot of people have asked me about because they don't want to do any of that technical stuff. So that one is a 30-day for $200. You just fill out a Google form and you let me know, and then I post it for you. So the average turnaround time from post to placement is something that I am unable to answer because as my job ads grow, I have not up till now gotten all the data from employers, whether they were placed or not. So this is, I would like to consider this more of a I'm your digital bridge. So I don't have statistics for that, but as I grow, I will look into it. And I'm actually starting a survey for all employers that have purchased with me, and I will start to get that data and I will place it onto my website for information as well. I hope that answered your question. And of course, anybody can always reach out to me via email afterwards. If you use this QR code, it'll take you to my website, but it's basically kasia@ikigaiconnections.com. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Any questions for Kasia?
Yeah, hello. This is Andrew Saito from Sanyo Corporation. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Thank you for asking. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah. I just had a quick question. I think the answer will be yes, but we may be looking for a, not maybe your typical Kagehashi personality, but like a salesperson with some Japanese language skills.
Yes.
Is that a good fit for this job posting?
Yes, I absolutely believe so. Yes.
Okay.
May I ask, out of curiosity, what state you are talking about?
Yeah, 2 states we are looking for: Michigan and Huntsville, Alabama.
Ooh, yes, Michigan, absolutely. I'm growing my connections in other states as well. My strongest one is obviously in Michigan because I'm from here, but
Sure.
Alabama as well too. And I'm finding that a lot of my followers share the job ad information with others. So the employers, when they purchase a job ad from me, they become a featured job ad, and that featured job ad goes on my social media, and then it can be shareable. So especially if you focus on a particular skill set, it's something that I can easily promote.
Okay, great. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
I have.
Oh,
Can I?
go ahead, Wendy.
Couple questions. I worked for a temporary staffing agency. Are these jobs that you're placing, are they all full-time, or do you have like temporary situations where you place people for temporary projects?
Yes, the employer who purchases or creates their job ad can pick from full-time, part-time, contract, freelance. There's different categories that you can select. And actually, even the freelance, I have a lot of people who are not looking for a full-time job. They just want something like a project-based. And so I have a lot of requests from those job seekers who want that as well. So I'm trying to help, I'll think of a way to promote that in the future too.
And my other thought is that I once, I'm a copywriter and I worked for an agency that had a Japanese client, and there was an incredible amount of miscommunication between the client was trying to advertise in the United States, but their concept of what the American buyer would want was very strange, and their visual concept was even worse. Just wondered if you have people that are in marketing that could kind of bridge that gap and how that might work.
Absolutely, yes. So the followers that I have are from various backgrounds, and a lot of them, they really don't think that they can combine their background, whether it's marketing, engineering, mathematics, accounting, whatever, with Japanese. So I really believe that any field can be represented, and absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Fred.
All right, Kasia, well, thank you so much for this great presentation. First of all, what's best about this presentation is that I can feel your passion about this. I think that's, most of the times when people are looking for people to hire, they're looking for people who really come in and excited to work. And, I can see that you have that quality. So whenever you are placing people to employers, you will transfer that passion with them as well. So I think, that's my takeaway here as well. Obviously, this is, Japanese job board. And as you can see that right now, with the Biden administration and the way the U.S. is really reshaping itself to become the manufacturing country once again, which means there will be so many other countries who are coming to the United States that need the passionate employees as well. So my question to you is, can you broaden that Ikigai connections to beyond the Japanese boundaries?
Yes, and I have actually received a lot of requests regarding this. So I am first going to focus on this job board, and I'm going to make sure that technically my job board works well, the process is smooth, the automated emails, so I can help everybody as much as possible. I've had requests from people to do the same thing in Canada for Japanese jobs in Canada, Japanese jobs in France, in Spain, and in Germany. And now as well, so like maybe Korean speakers, Chinese speakers in the United States, I think that's definitely something that maybe it could be like a franchise model, and I set up the actual technical component, and then maybe I can have somebody run it, because the promotion of it is very difficult. It's a chicken egg situation. I can't just have companies, I need to have the job seekers, and I can't just have job seekers because I can't promise them, I have to promise them that there's something on the other end. So growing this relationship it's taken me since 2018. I've been doing it very organically. I haven't really promoted this, advertised this. It's just word of mouth. And over time, I've reached these 5,000 plus followers, which to me is wonderful. I know it's not like millions, but it's a niche group. So I would like to do the same for other languages, and I'll see. I'll give it another couple of years to kind of test this out. It's a lot of work.
Kasia, have you connected with staffing companies in the United States? I'm thinking specifically of those like marketing communications, because trying to fill jobs for clients with the kind of people you're talking about can be impossible for those people unless they were to connect with someone like you.
Absolutely. My job board is also for the recruiting side as well. And they have, I've had many of them have these job ads where they're looking for a particular person, because it is difficult. It's frustrating when you want something so bad, you want to find a candidate for a certain role, and you just don't really know how to get there. And it's just, especially if you don't understand the language. So I am working with them as well. And I hope to, because I'm actually, and I didn't mention this in the presentation, but I do not call myself a recruiter. I am not going to be vetting the candidates. I can't. It's gotten to the point where I can't meet everybody individually. I can just become this bridge to connect the two groups. But absolutely, recruiters, I connect with them as well, just to say, hey, if you're really stuck on finding this bilingual designer or engineer, please come to me and take a look. So thank you very much for that. I absolutely will promote that. Yes, I see Kevin.
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to very briefly touch on what the gentleman from Sanyo was saying. It was interesting because he was saying, is the sales position going to be appropriate for someone with this knowledge of Japanese? And I do want to underscore that, there are a lot of people who have very high level skills and also the Japanese language behind them. And that can be a very, very powerful combination. I was, in the early 90s, I was hired by Toshiba America to help with on the sales side, to help with a Japanese engineer. We sort of were a buddy team, and we went out calling on customers together. He didn't speak a word of English, and I didn't speak a word of engineering. But by the end of our buddy calls, in about 3 or 4 years, I got a lot better in engineering, and unfortunately his English wasn't very good. but that ability then to be able to not only act as a translator for him and get his very important information across, but then to meet the American customer at the level that they needed to, and also then be able to go back to my Japanese employers and feedback that information in a way that that it was actionable within their own organization, was hugely, hugely important, and it really helped business a lot. So yes, I would say that, this is not just entry-level positions. This is not just people providing a cultural bridge, but a very real and valuable business experience and business skill.
You touch upon such an important point, and it's so many people think that knowing another language is just an expensive hobby. It's just a class you take in college. There's so much more to that. We are a global society right now. We have to communicate. Yes, we're lucky in the United States because English is commonly used, but when you show, like, if you are a non-Japanese person studying Japanese or whatever other language, and you connect with that Japanese company person representative, and you show them that you want to learn about their culture and their business practices, I mean, that's just a great way to help cement a relationship. It's not just us and we, speaking English and just doing it one-sided. It's coming together and sharing that you want to learn about them. So that's the magic of knowing another language. I really think it's fundamental to business practice. So sales, any kind of role, I think is important.
We have about 2 minutes left. Does anybody have any last questions for Kasia? Okay, well, let me ask one real quick. So Kasia, you had mentioned that there are folks who may have studied Japanese, maybe even lived in Japan, but never got to use that skill or that experience, and now they're kind of mid-career. How would you encourage them to pluck their courage and say, you know what, I want to give this a try because I enjoyed living in Japan. I loved learning the language. I loved learning the culture, and I never really got to fully utilize it. What would you say to them to get them started?
I say it's never too late to go after your dream. And if it's something, and I have so many people coming to me saying, I've always wanted to use Japanese, but I stopped because I needed to be home in this state. There was no Japanese job openings. There was no opportunities for me. So I just kind of gave up on that dream. But you can tell, I mean, it still lives within them. They either have, maybe they have a Japanese spouse and children, so they use Japanese at home, or they have connections with Japan. And they just, I think a lot of people have given up on their dreams. And lately, and I don't know if it's because the pandemic has forced us all to be at home thinking about what we really want, so many people are being like, you know what, I want to use Japanese. And they're coming from out of the woodworks, and they're like beginning again. And I think it's hard for them, because then they think they have to go to an entry-level position and start all over again. And it's harder when you have family and, you know, mortgage and tuition to think about. But I think that there are enough, I think, especially with the companies that are represented here, for example, I say, give these people a chance, give them an opportunity. They just need that opportunity. And if it's maybe it could be a lateral move, and now they're just going to do a little bit with Japan, or maybe they're going to be involved in, if they're in sales, maybe, they can start doing something with a Japanese client, and they can, it really is slowly but surely, and having this understanding that consideration to give them this opportunity.
Okay, thanks very much. Kevin, do we have time for one more question, or do we need to conclude here?
I think we probably need to conclude.
Okay, all right. So I'm sorry if anybody else had a question. Thank you all very, very much for attending.